Let's talk about your documentary and why did you want to make this movie?
I think, the story of a guy who gives up his comfort and his celebrity to go enlist in the military is interesting in and of itself, and the fact that Pat was killed, as most people know, he was killed, and then the government tried to lie about it. And I think most people know that, there's been some kind of a cover-up. Anyway, I was interested in the sort of the bare bones facts.
Right.
And then I think the thing that really started to pique my interest is getting to know his family.
When did you first hear about him? Like the rest of us?
Yeah, just like the rest of us.
Right.
Yeah. One of the interesting things about this story is that it's been very superficially treated by the by the media, so by the mainstream media. So a lot of what all of us knew about Pat Tillman is just plain wrong. It's just a sort of a cartoon version of it. And anybody who takes like a little bit of time to just scratch beneath the surface starts to see that, like, for instance, you mentioned that photo of him. He's sort of the opposite of that photo. That photo kind of gives this impression of this square-jawed, paragon of patriotism and stuff like that. And like immediately upon looking into it, we realized that he was much more complex than that. And so then it really became like peeling back an onion, where the more you find out about this guy, the more heroic he becomes, but not in any of the ways they said he was. So it's been a great. So we spent 3 years on it.
How did you get the family?
The family is incredibly private, and they really, have never. They've always been. I'd say this about the Tillmans: they have a very healthy sense of what's public and what's private in a time when nobody seems to have that sense, And so they were. I would say they were hard to convince to do this because they didn't want to. It's grief for them, and for them, grief is personal, and they had already been. They felt like they had been kind of used as props already a bunch of times. And that becomes a part of our film. But yeah, it wasn't easy to convince them. And
what does it start with when you get this? You've seen it. I want to make this movie. I want to make this story. I feel that there's another story happening under here, and I want to get to the truth of that story.
Yeah.
How do you find their number?
That's a really good question.
How do you call them? Do you go to their house?
The Tillmans, right?
Like, how do you start that?
Well,
process?
that's pretty simple. It's just basic stalking 101. Any smitten, teenager or college kid knows how to do that. It's just, how do you get their phone number? I mean, it's just, I think any, journalist knows how to get somebody's phone number, get somebody's email address. And it's really hard because, it's hard to convince somebody to do something that I don't know that I would do, And for instance, his younger brother, his youngest brother, Richard Tillman, had turned us down. And so we said, and God, those were really painful conversations, trying to get him go on camera to talk about this extremely painful thing, because I just felt like, shit, I wouldn't do this. In the end, he saw the film that we made. We basically finished the film without his participation, and he saw it and he said, I regret saying no. So we were like, whew, that's going to be a lot more editing, but we couldn't, so we basically flew him out to New York and opened the thing up and put him into it, and now I can't imagine the film without him. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So yeah, we stalked them. There's a scene in the film where they basically, after 4 years of his mom kind of single-handedly leading the family's quest for justice, they got it to Congress, and they got a congressional hearing, and we intercepted them there basically, and along with a bunch of other people, kind of accosted them afterwards, and so that kind of a thing, basic stalking. They said yes.
What is the thing that shocked you most about this story?
There's a misperception out there that the government has very carefully kind of cultivated, which is that after 5 weeks they did come clean. They said it was a friendly fire, and that's actually completely the opposite, completely untrue, because in 5 weeks, they basically said everything we told you the first time, that Pat was this, basically a John Wayne figure who died saving the life of his platoon single-handedly, went down in a blaze of Taliban gunfire. Ridiculous stuff that's almost laughable, like he could be heard yelling, "Let's take the fight to the enemy," just absurd stuff that is pulled right from Hollywood films. They said, everything we told you before is still true, except we just figured out that he happened to catch an errant U.S. bullet in this chaotic ambush that we told you happened. Well, when his family started looking into it, and the way they looked,
why do you think they looked into it?
That's a testament to his mother, because many, I think, moms, when told, sorry, your son's dead, but he's an American hero, he's going to get the third highest, Silver Star, which is like a big deal. They wouldn't have questioned it.
Military family as well, right?
Absolutely.
All of that.
His mom would rather have the truth than have her son be.
She knew something in her knew.
She knew something, and it's funny. This isn't in the film, but her son, Richard, that I mentioned, he said he had a sneaking feeling the first time they said it, and like he heard this, like I said, this glorious story, and he said, "Pat wasn't that stupid." He would have ducked. He wouldn't have run up a hill into the blazing gunfire. So the family is like a very, in their own rights, heroic family. And in many ways, it's a film about them as much, if not more, than it is about Pat. And the military made this very arrogant blunder in giving his mom this crate. I mean, it's a giant crate of documents related to her son's death. She used a bit of Pat's celebrity to kind of, get to senators and lean on them. And, they basically said, heck, she's not going to go through this, because every page in this crate was 100% redacted. No names, no places, it basically is just 3,000 pages of black lines. And she spent 3 years, the better part of 3 years, painstakingly unredacting these documents. And, you asked about what was the biggest surprise. When she got to the end of this process, she realized that it wasn't an errant bullet. It wasn't even really a fog of war at all. It was from 40 meters away. It was not a couple seconds. It was a minute long, or maybe even 2 minutes. There's some question about that, but a minute is a very long time to be shooting at somebody who's 40 meters away. Pat Tillman had time to throw a purple smoke grenade, to wave, to scream at these guys. It turns out it was an accident, but barely an accident, and nobody's ever paid for that.
And what do you hope people will get from this when they see it? I mean, it's already generating a lot of discussion.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that because it's been a really amazing couple days here up at Sundance. It's like I feel like the family, they strike a blow against symbolism for reality. It's really like what the film is I hope it captures something about this family.
The country
narrative
needed Pat Tillman at that time. They absolutely needed him, and it doesn't surprise me. Of course, the government is pulling lines from World War II movies,
right?
Because in a way, a nation, we kind of need that, but but now more and more and more, all those are being blown wide open, whether it's from a celebrity or a politician, and between all the affairs and all the scandals, and now this, it's like,
no, you're putting your finger on exactly.
We don't really have it left.
Right. Well, it's fun. We rob ourselves of it as a nation. It's like we were going to make him into our hero, no matter who the hell he was.
He was a football player. You kids their whole life.
Yeah, but nobody took the time to find out who he actually was. And so it's very and there's a great irony.
Know.
Right.
I mean, part of it.
Well, they have a cartoon in their head. They have, like you said, a World War II movie in their head, and it's unfortunate because it robs us of like the possibility of actually having these heroes, because there are probably a lot more heroes around us than we care to realize, but. As you said, we live in this age of like the narrative, and everybody just basically, I mean, there must probably be like 6 Hollywood movies in everybody's head, and you just apply one of them to whatever situation you are in reality, like, oh, this must be the John Wayne guy, this must be and it's really to be on the butt end of that, as the Tillmans have been, is very confusing and frustrating, because at the same time as you're basically, your son is being praised for being somebody he isn't.